what is a prenup?
Sure. A prenup, Anthony, is a contract that two people enter into in contemplation of marriage. So if you and your significant other plan to get married, you set a date and all that, you decide to sit down, usually with a lawyer, to work out how you're going to resolve issues and differences if the marriage should dissolve. You put that into writing, into an agreement, both of you sign it, and it should be legally binding if it's done correctly. If it's done correctly.
Why do you say if like that?
Because it's easy to challenge prenups sometimes. There are some grounds on which people can challenge a prenup down the road. So it really matters that you get the right legal, competent representation early in the process. But yeah, it's a contract between two people.
Wow.
Yeah, and because if you don't decide what's going to happen to your property, your assets, your money down the road, if you do divorce, the state is going to do it for you. So.
Wait.
Yeah.
Right. So it's either we do a prenup in the very beginning when we love each other.
And like each other, yes.
And like each other.
Yeah.
Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I love you and if I like you, I'm going to be very generous and very, honest.
You're more likely to be fair.
Right.
I think on the front end when you are in love and you're seeing stars and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So it's better to decide what happens to your money when you are both on the same page than when you're sort of at the opposite. Because the thing is, Anthony, when people divorce, you're not generally divorcing the same person you married. Ooh. Sometimes you don't even recognize the person that you're divorcing when you get to that point. And so sometimes all bets are off at the end of the day. And so it's much better to, when you're on speaking terms and you are really enjoying each other, to sit down, have a mature conversation about what happens if you happen to fall into that 50% where the marriage does not survive.
Okay. You're teaching good, so I'm just asking questions.
Sure.
If we don't do the prenup and then we fast forward and for whatever reason, life happens, unfortunately, we can't make it.
Yeah.
There's a divorce. Now you're saying the state that we live in decides what happens with our assets and everything.
Yeah, if you don't, unless you can reach an agreement between the two of you. So, but it's divorce law, it's very state specific. So depending upon which state you're in, it might be an equitable distribution jurisdiction, it might be a community property state. Okay. But either which way you look at it, the state's going to decide what happens to your money and how the property's divided, unless you reach an agreement or have a prenuptial.
So I know you're in the DMV area.
Yeah.
So I know that's where you practice. Do you know what is one of the hardest states to have a divorce from the state perspective?
I think that's hard to answer because I think every divorce really takes on a life of its own. Okay. A lot of the factors that impact that are the people, how difficult and or agreeable the couple is that's divorcing.
Yeah.
Whether you're looking at it from a very spiteful, malicious standpoint and just want to get your ex back, that's going to make for a very difficult divorce versus trying to just resolve the problem as maturely as you can. So I think that's hard to answer in terms of a state.
I love it. One of my mentors, actually a couple of my mentors advised me, there's Anthony, as you're building your brand, as you're building your wealth, you should consider having a prenup. And I am definitely considering that because I've learned prenups is not just about the finances.
Yeah.
Can you help us understand what all does a prenup cover?
It can cover almost anything and everything except issues that relate to children. In terms of child custody, you cannot determine in a prenuptial agreement what would happen to the children if you were to divorce. You cannot set a fixed amount of child support, let's say, down the road, in the future. So issues that relate to the children are going to be probably outside the scope of a prenup. But other than that, you can have a prenup that's as detailed as, how many, who does household chores, who can use whose likeness, your image, social media. You can have a prenup that really addresses anything and everything. But most commonly it's used to address alimony, spousal support payments. It's used to address the property, what happens, who gets to keep the house or homes, plural.
Yeah.
It can determine what happens if someone is found cheating.
Ooh, yeah.
Whether there's adultery or infidelity in the marriage, you can have special provisions that say you don't get to keep anything if you decide to be unfaithful.
Right.
You can include what we call sometimes sunset provisions, where after a certain amount of time that you've been married, the prenup then expires like after 20 years, 25 years. So there's really so much that you can do and include in a prenuptial agreement that helps to minimize the tension down the road.
Now, do you recommend that? Like if you sign a prenup, okay, y'all together for 20 years, let it go.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the couple. You know, it's what I offer are very customized services. So you have to really look at the individuals that are coming to you, and each party to a prenup should probably have their own attorney. Because it's a conflict of interest. I can't represent both sides. But I would look at my client, look at the needs, long-term goals, what they anticipate, the issues that they're having already, because most couples still have issues, even if they love each other. And then you decide what makes sense.
My brain is already like a little bit tired because I'm like, man, it's just a lot of information to take in around this conversation. Because one part of me as a Christian, to be honest, is, am I saying I don't trust God by having my wife sign a prenup, or a wife, future wife, having her future husband sign a prenup? Like, I still battle that inside of my head.
Well, and understandably so, because people say that to have a prenup is planning for divorce. You're planning for the end, and marriage is forever, and you're taking a vow before God and all that stuff. And I think that you can look at it from a different perspective, Anthony. I mean, one, you can look at a prenup, first of all, as a type of insurance, right? Like we trust God every time we get in our car that he's going to protect us and keep us covered. We trust God every time we go to sleep at night that we're not, the house isn't going to burn down, et cetera. But you still have car insurance. You still have property insurance, So it's really, it's not much different from that perspective, because remember, God also gives us wisdom and discernment. So things happen. And the other side of it is you can only control yourself.
Right.
So you don't know what changes your spouse may go through over the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Okay.
So because of those uncertainties that we cannot control, it makes sense to at least explore whether a prenup is right for you and your situation.
So let's go there. Who should sign a prenup?
See, the lawyer in me says everyone. So, but
everyone? So even if a guy's only making $30,000 a year, you would still say, if you're marrying someone, still sign a prenup.
So, that's the guy. What is the woman making? I mean, we don't.
Let's say she's making 60. So what I'm saying, like, should they still sign a prenup?
I think that you should at least speak to someone about whether it makes sense. Because what is the vision that you have for your life? What is the vision that your soon-to-be spouse has for their lives? I mean, if you plan to grow, if you plan to, develop wealth, whether you're making 30 or 60, you can still certainly build together. And what happens if you feel like one of you is not pulling his or her weight in the marriage? There's resentment that can build up. So I think it makes sense to at least speak to someone about whether a prenup is right for you.
So a prenup doesn't cover pre-marriage. A prenup can also cover what you gain inside of the marriage as well?
Well, that's the focus of a prenup, actually, is what happens to property or assets that would otherwise be considered marital money or marital assets. And that is determined by your state. The state that you live in defines what marital property is. What happens to that marital property if you divorce down the road?
So I thought prenups was only, if I have $1 million, you have or 50,000. She ain't that broke, y'all. She got money. I just had to say it on my show because it's my show. If I have $1 million, you got 50, we get married, it only protects me up until that $1 million.
That's what you thought?
Yes. Not before now. This was before really understanding prenups.
Okay.
So it's like if we get married, so I think a lot of people believe that. Like prenups only cover like what I come into the marriage with. But if that $1 million goes to 10 million, I'm even still protecting that 10 million.
Yeah, so let's say, for example, I'm only licensed in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, right? So if we take those 3 jurisdictions, the way that marital property is defined, or separate property, is any money that you had prior to the marriage is your separate property, unless you commingle it. So that property is already going to be yours, with or without a prenup. So once you get married, and you continue to build wealth or acquire assets, that's what's on the table for the court to divide and say, you may have, your spouse may not have lifted a dime, let's say, in your business, but we think the business is marital property and should be divided, the value should be divided 50-50. That's going to hurt.
Yeah.
If you've been the one putting in your blood, sweat, and tears for 5, 10, 15, however long you've had it. Yeah. So it's really about, in large part, what's happening during the marriage that a prenup can I think, decide.
So,
yeah.